while I am waiting for folks to be notified about this live, as this will be reposted on YouTube later, I wanted to give a huge thank you to my Patreons. You have been the ones to be funding my work recently, and it's because of you that I've started to really up my quality as far as reenactments go and quality in general. So thanks so much to my Patreons. And on that note, hello everybody who is now entering this. It is good to see you virtually, so to speak. And I am waiting on Emily to pop in so we can talk about otherworldly beings, which is something I'm super excited to go over. Good afternoon, everyone. My family has been doing all right. The way I described it today was, I feel like there's, on a universal level, this kind of, what are they called? A riptide. Like in the ocean, you get riptides, and you can either swim against them and get so exhausted that you would eventually be in some real trouble, or you swim with them and you can eventually use that to get to shore. So that's kind of how I feel. But it's not so much straight family stuff. I think it's more universal stuff that happens to be affecting us. So yeah. And this live is also brought to you by kombucha. Hello, folks. Let's see. Hello, hello. My voice is your favorite. Thank you. Somebody made fun of me for saying orange instead of orange. I was like, so that's American stage standard, which I have training in. So there's that. Wobble Pop, is that what this is called? This is called Big Easy. The reason you can't see anything, does anybody else not see anything? I see me. I actually do not do tours anymore. They were very historically inaccurate, and hearing ghosts correct me in the middle of tours was getting to be a lot. So, this is kombucha, so if you consider kombucha an adult beverage, sure. Thank you, I actually just got this job. It was actually, this helped me feel better about my purchases. I don't buy a lot of things, and it was actually one of Emily's videos where she was just like, hey, you should feel like you. And I was like, I feel validated for actually buying things for myself. I know someone's pretending to be me. Unfortunately, that is old news. It's just a matter of the name keeps changing, so if that happens, all you have to do is block and report them. I am aware of the situation, and all I can do myself is block and report them until I'm verified. And that's what I do. So, yeah. Somebody wants to be live with me, but that's not who I'm waiting for. So anywho, hello people. Oh, you're gonna be visiting Wilmington. Awesome. I am a volunteer at the museum now. I actually haven't announced that yet. I was getting so busy with content creation. My Patreons have certainly helped me a huge, substantial amount with that to be able to make content and have that be more income-based. And yeah, I am going to continue making or helping them make content, but from a volunteer level because I love them and that's something that I can do and without having specific timing. Thanks for all the compliments. I really appreciate it. Hello, Louisiana. My day is getting better, I'll tell you that much. Oh, cool. P.S. I also have an interactive map on my Patreon for Wilmington. It's like if you're looking to take a tour with me, but obviously I'm not offering them, at least not anytime soon, because I'd have to be doing that on a personal level. But yeah, pretty much I have all my spots laid out on a Google map, and most of them are very walkable, including like places I love to eat and like good bars that I enjoy and like haunted spots, of course, like all of the haunted spots. But I also have other cities I've visited as well. So if that's of interest, check that out. It is on Google and my Patreon. So yay, goodness, thanks. All of the compliments. I feel like I should get Cider to sponsor me if I'm gonna get this many compliments. I'm really happy with this shirt. It makes me feel really good. So hello, Texas. Cool. Goodness, everybody's being so nice. As I mentioned, I am waiting on Emily. I imagine she's going to be in momentarily. How's the book coming along? So the book is coming along. I keep getting more and more developments, more and more history comes through, just more and more, and it keeps putting my process back. So one thing I'm actually looking to do with my book is to release snippets on my Patreon, and it might be at the $10 range, but there'll be snippets and like that sort of thing. So that's one way I want to get back. So yeah. Goodness, everybody. Yeah, the book will be coming out. That I will release that certainly here on my Instagram and certainly on my newsletter. By the way, for anybody who's watching this and they're like, I haven't seen you in so long, I have been posting. It's the algorithm. And I don't know what's up with that, but it is what it is. Oh goodness, any crazy experiences happening lately? Ooh. Yes, they have been. That's what I have to say about that. I'm still processing some things. Like, I'm fine. All of my family is fine. And that's the thing. Thanks, everybody, for all the kind words on my top. Yes, Emily. Hi.
There we go. Hi.
How are you?
I don't know why it wasn't working forever. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's this. I'll be real. I've been looking forward to talking to you all day.
I know. Me too. I'm really stoked.
So how are
this
things
is
out
nice.
there for you?
How are days? What? Say that again.
How are things out there for you? You are on the other coast from mine.
Well, I only just returned to the other coast. We had a writing retreat this past week, so I got home at like 2 a.m. yesterday.
Fun?
From that. So it's good. It snowed last week, and now it's sunny and you can go to the beach. So,
Yeah.
that's how I'm at.
I don't know if anybody can see. I've got some redness on me. I'm not fully addressing that I may have been what some people call perhaps maybe burned somewhat by this planet in the sky. But I've just been saying I've had some disagreements with Apollo recently, and I keep coming out alive. So I feel very good about that. That's just how I've been describing it.
That's one way of putting it. I have never heard anyone call a sunburn a disagreement with Apollo, but I think I'll probably use that forever now.
Yeah, and how cool is it when you can come out of that and be like, look, we had a disagreement the other day, but I'm alive.
Right? The best part about that is I work with Apollo all the time. Like the way Hermes is for you, Apollo is for me.
Yeah.
So like to me that's like extra funny. I'm like, oh great, so I'm just gonna pick on him and be like, why'd you burn me?
See, I think especially too, I agree with that, to be like, dude, what did I do to you? I left this offering out, like I thought we were cool. What's up with this?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm curious. Oh, what?
No, go for it. What were you gonna say?
So, well, I'll start this off. I texted you, I think, like last week because I was listening to Alchemist Anonymous, which I will always praise.
The Alchemist Inkwell. You just combined two podcast names and it was so cute.
I'm a winner today. Let me tell you how much I am a winner today. Because I was just
that
like,
is
wait,
all right. I love it.
Okay, thank you. Alchemist Inkwell. The point is, I listened to it even if I apparently couldn't read what I was looking at.
That's all right. Continue. You were listening to it.
So I was
For all of you guys who don't know, The Alchemist Inkwell is my podcast, which is what Rebekah is addressing.
Yes.
And I do it with Crystal Lynn. It's all fun. We do it together. It's fantastic. Anyway, continue.
I will say, one, it's always super validating because I know a lot of intuitive or spiritually sensitive people follow both of us. And there are days and weeks where I always feel like, am am I okay? Is it everything? Is it me? Like that kind of thing. So it's always very validating to hear the astrology from Crystalline as well as the energy that you talk about. And
Thank you.
really, well, goodness, actually, I have something. I'm remembering this. So I want to get to the point of why we're meeting, which is otherworldly beings for everybody who just tuned in. Though first,
Yeah.
a fun question. Looking at this week leading up to the eclipse, if you could describe it as a metaphor, how would you describe that?
Okay. Okay. I literally just asked my guides, I was like, what metaphor? And this is what they gave me. So get ready. So do you remember in middle school when you had your like you had to do a speech for speech class and it was on a topic you really didn't want to talk about, but you definitely still like had to do it and it was like not a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to prepare and you were looking at stuff and you're kind of like, okay, I guess this is going to be as good as I do. And then you give the speech and it's like it's like kind of comes to a head and you're like, okay, I did it. Yay. That's the energy of this week. Where it's a lot less of like you have any control over the situation and more like you're going to go through it anyway. So you're just going to have to sit and watch and view it as you would in that particular speech class because the eclipse especially, so the first one's the solar eclipse. It's on Saturday and it eclipse season in general, and Krista can talk more about the astrology. She's amazing for that. We just released a podcast episode. What day is it today? It's Thursday. We released it today. No, it's Wednesday. We're releasing it tomorrow. See, I just traveled a whole bunch. I have no idea.
You're good.
But we're releasing it tomorrow, all about the eclipse. So if you want to know more of the astrology behind it, by all means listen to it then. But eclipses are really just time for you to sit there and just be like witnessing all of the energy around you.
Mm-hmm.
And this week is leading us up towards that, which equal parts means there's some stuff that you're going to kind of be like, wow, I'm really tired and I'm just kind of floating along and just dealing with stuff, which is great. And then equal parts, you're going to probably be really triggered energetically quite a bit and like a lot quicker to react versus think about how you're going to react a lot quicker, like to just say things out of your face when you don't want to. Your poor partner is probably going to go through the same thing and you guys are going to go back and forth. It's just always how it works. But yeah, so the eclipse this week, I would say it's like preparing for a speech you don't want to do in speech class and that you have to do anyway.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be bad. It's really good. It's activating. It's healthy. It's awesome. Like it's always was going to happen. You're here for it to happen. So duh, it's going to be good for you. Promise. But it's going to be probably pretty activating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And okay, so besides my general understanding, and I relate to that, and I've kind of been thinking about it in a similar but different metaphoric way. But the reason why I wanted to ask you, especially if any of my followers are not following you by now, that's why we follow you. I'm pointing at you from my end, but it's probably this end for you. Right. Thank you, Rosie. P.S. For anybody who doesn't know Rosie, she's our foster fail from like over a month ago. She knew Mira, by the way. We didn't know Mira was sick when we got her, but they love each other and Mira's still around. But anyway, that's a long story.
So, Rebecca, that's really cool. I didn't know you had a foster fail.
Yeah, we got her before we knew Mira was sick, and the reason why we decided to keep going with her was she cared a lot about Mira, and that really mattered to us. So now she is here.
That's amazing. I love that.
But and now she's wanting what this is. So yeah, a friend of mine said that we don't adopt dogs, we adopt potatoes, and that resonates with me. So, but yeah,
Sure.
As I was saying, if you want easy ways to understand energy, like obviously follow Emily. And if you want easy ways to understand astrology, follow Crystalline. And that is my blurb. For the energy for me this week, it's kind of felt like a lot of people were really getting caught up in a lot of drama. And it was like, I didn't feel immediately affected by this drama, but because it was happening to people I knew, it was starting to get it. So I started to compare it as, oh goodness, I literally had the word. It's like when you're in the ocean and a riptide. So with, a riptide, it's like it pulls you out. You can't do anything about it. If you get caught up in it, it will pull you out. So once you're out there, you're in the ocean, you've been pulled out. you have a decision to make. You can either fight it and sit there and just exhaust yourself, or you can swim with it, and you might be swimming farther than you expected to, but at some point you can swim the edge of it and actually get to shore. And that's, I'm swimming right now, but I'm not fighting it. I'm just swimming.
Perfect. That's exactly like my speech analogy. Like, you still have to do the research because you still have to make a speech, but you like really don't want it. So yeah, that's exactly it. That is the energy. And it also is funny, like both of us have forgotten words now, I think 3 times since we've been on. And that is also very kind of indicative of the energy this week when I've looked at it. It's very space casey and kind of floaty and just kind of like your head's in the clouds a little bit, which a lot of people bypass that kind of energy with drama because it feels very anchoring and grounding to be in a space where everything's really activated. Mm-hmm. So that's probably also what you're feeling.
Yeah. During some of my consults and readings this week, there have been times I'm trying to find the word, and I just look at them and I'm like, if I could just emote to you, if I could emote to you the way that emotions happen to me when I'm channeling, we would be on the same page. But then I have to be like, but words.
You're like, I'll just send you the thought and you can just get it.
Yeah,
that's how it'll work.
Anywho, one, I want to say real quick on my chat, everybody's being so kind and complimentary, and not just to me, but to each other and to Emily, and I just wanted to point that out. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
I love that. I know, absolutely. Same on my chat. You guys are just being so sweet, and I appreciate all of you validating each other's experience. It's pretty fantastic.
So, on that note of our people being so awesome, we wanted to share with you otherworldly beings. And the purpose in this, when I initially texted you about this, was if you only see with your eyes, there are things that could look very scary because they look different to us. But that's why I always encourage, one, myself, but also anybody who is looking to tap into these sorts of things, to also see with your other senses. And it's in being able to do that that allows for other understanding of perhaps there's more out there than just souls, and for some angels, and for some demons. This initially started. Well, before I get into my question for you, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's really great. I was actually, even before we hopped on, someone asked, they were like, have you ever seen a dragon or channeled a dragon? And I was like, yeah. So I gave a quick analogy, and some of you may have already heard it, but for all of Rebekah's following who's watching too, when it comes to otherworldly beings, there's a ton of different ways to think about it. Some of them do kind of come from kind of like parallel realm spaces though. And so when I talk about that, I always talk about it in the same sense as like a Venn diagram. So if like, this is our Earth, it is an Earth circle, then the different kind of realms intersect that, right? Like a Venn diagram would. So we have like dragons, or we'll have like fairies, or we'll have like demons, or we'll have like, you name it, right? They're all intersectional in different spaces in that way. And sometimes in some parts of the planet, or even in small like little energy holes, that's like the place where it intersects, right? There's like that bit, the oval bit where it overcrosses. And that's where you get like a lot of, when the planet was higher vibration, ancient times, a lot of crossover mythologies and a lot of different cultures that really had nothing to do with each other. And yes, they still had interactions with the same kind of beings, those kind of things. And yeah, sometimes, and also on that note, like their own worlds, just like our own worlds, are not all good or all bad. And so like our morality doesn't apply to that in any way. Like I always, highlight that as much as possible, because we have our own ingrained sense of morality, and this is what is good and what is bad, and no one is one or the other entirely. But theirs are entirely different in that space too. So it's always, I highly agree with your point of like, you can't just look with your eyes. Sometimes they look terrifying, but they're actually sweethearts. Sometimes they look beautiful and they're actually not nice. Like it goes a million different directions, especially with the work that you do with seeing ghosts and interacting with them. And I've done that, a decent amount too. And sometimes, like, yeah, the scary guys look scary, and sometimes the scary guys, the ones you should be afraid of, don't look that way at all. So having your own energetic senses, whether that is you see them and then you feel like a physical reaction, or you can just use your own intuitive sense of like, ooh, this feels kind of funny and weird, and something about this feels off. Like, that's enough. Your claircognizance, whatever it is that comes in. But no, I completely agree with you, and the way you presented that is very accurate, because there's such a wide variety. And they can also be your guides too. Like, you may have higher self agreements with these beings. Like, I have a dragon guide who's one of my friends. We get along great. He's fantastic. He used to be small, now he's big. Every time I talk to him, he makes me mention that. So that's his own ego thing. I don't know why, every single time. So
Yep.
Everyone gets to know I used to have a tiny dragon that now is very large.
And
yeah.
I'm so appreciative that you brought up the having to do with what I call moral code, because the human moral code will look different from other species' moral code. And I say species because my moral code looks different from Rosie's moral code as she licks her leg. I mean, I do not lick my leg, so that's kind of... Anyway. I know, it's wild.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point, though. The other day I had someone ask me, they were like, do like cereal have, I don't know if I can say it on live. I know I can't say it in videos, but do cereal unalivers have spirit guides? And I was like, well, yeah, I've channeled on this before. And this is always a hard thing to say, but basically I came in and I was kind of like, why? Like, why would they have guides? Like, what is going on? And literally my guide came back and said, well, because the universe doesn't operate off of your ideals of morality, Emily. I was like, okay, fine. Like, back right off of that. You're right. You win. But it's true. It's just how it works.
Yeah. I think too, we come into lives, or at least I believe that we come into lives with something to learn. And that's why I know some people will say, oh, your guides mean you the best, which they do. Though I would add on to that, your guides mean you the best in order to follow through with the thing that you are here to learn, whatever that may be. So I know, especially because of the energy right now, there's a lot of folks who feel very uncertain about things, or who are looking for drama as a way to ground or something like that. And you've made videos on this before, and it's certainly a topic that's really been coming up in my consults recently, of like, what is the direction? Where am I going? I feel so lost. Are my guides even here? And it's not that they went anywhere. It's sometimes slowing down enough to acknowledge them. I think today I had a number of things happen that were not awesome. And I know some of these things, if I were to have these things happen to me, say 5 years ago, I would sit there and be like, oh man, I had all the terrible things happen to me today. But nowadays I look at it and say, oh man, I had a few things happen to me that I did not enjoy, but then I had a number of things be able to at least create a state of balance. So I know by the end of the day, I'm going to go to sleep and I know I'm going to feel fulfilled that I had the experiences I needed to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't always know. For a long time, I was like, yeah, we come here because we have certain things to learn. And I think it's yes and on that. Like, I think that's that's part of it, but only a little part of it. It's not the whole picture, because I think there's other reasons, like our energy needs to come in to help someone else learn, or our energy needs to be part of something else that's going on in the collective, or maybe we come to serve something else. Like, there's so much expansive energy that can be at our fingertips, then I feel like we end up trying to fit it into the small buckets that we deign it could fit into. And so, yeah, it's always really expansive. And keeping all of that in mind, that there's so much that we don't know, and there's so much larger perspective about our lives and everything that's going on, is super vital in order for us to be able to go with the flow that is apparently also going on this live, because people are saying it's glitchy. So here we are.
Yeah. I've got some that came on here. They were like, hi, I'm still watching, just came over to mine. So anybody who does that, yeah. You
We get it.
you're
Go for
entirely
it.
fine from my end, and for anybody watching who wants to catch up or anything, I always post these on YouTube as soon as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And also going in with perspective and that kind of thing, I want to go back into how guides can be otherworldly beings, and how I think when they work with us on different things according to what they find morally acceptable, it does create somewhere some kind of balance. It's just, we are a tapestry, we are strings in a tapestry. We don't always see everything, but it's a part of something.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree.
So
And we usually like have an agreement with our guides before we come, right? We're like, I need help with like this, and this thing as we go through. And your guides are like, rock on, I will help you with that, which is what makes them your guide, right? It's like a mutual agreement that you guys came together and we're like, this works good for both of us. It's a win-win-win. So that doesn't always mean that they agreed to always answer every time you talk. Like even my guides who I talk to constantly, and I'm really close with my guides. Sometimes I'll be like, what's going on here? And it's just crickets. And I'm like, oh, that's just mean, but you're helping me along the thing you agreed to help me with. And also it's important to remember, like, they are the ones that know more of the magical pieces. They can see the full picture. So always put more pressure on them. Like, you're not the omnipotent magical being in this existence at this particular moment in time. They are. So like making them kind of figure it out for you can be really helpful.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, going back into things, so another thing that I texted you about was, I said, Emily, you are probably one of the few people on this earth that I would trust when it comes to fairies. Because you mentioned that in the podcast, and I was like, I trust you. I I hear a lot of things, and there are a lot of books that I don't know about. So yeah, if that that's my question. The
Yes.
To a beginner and in a safe way, because I know you're very safe with how you come across and explain things. How would you describe fairies?
So this is one of those questions. Thank you for asking it because it's important to ask and I appreciate that. However, there is a lot of different schools of thought around fairies, and a couple of them that I want to honor. There is some indigenous folklore kind of magic ideas around fairies, and I am in no way speaking against the grain of those traditions. I haven't studied in those traditions, and I'm not trying to appropriate from those traditions at all. So when I speak about fairies, I am purely talking about the ones I've channeled, the ones that I've worked with, which is fairly extensive. I've done quite a bit with it. And my experience with them, also what I've been told from my guides and my higher self in my practice with them. Because I, like you, was originally like, basically I was getting poked by the fairies continually. And I was like, I don't want to work with them. I'm just going to keep saying no and trying to shut that door. Because I had heard so many very not great things about working with fairies, that they're tricksters, that you don't want to tell them your name, you don't want to tell them thank you, all these different things. And so there's a couple different ways that I like to think about it. First of all, for those of you who just comment, there's like 4 people that just commented, glitchy, 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 glitchy. Go to Rebekah's live, like hop over to Rebekah's page. It's not glitching on her end. I don't know why it's doing this, but you can watch it over there and it won't be as glitchy. And that's fine. Don't worry about leaving my live numbers. Just go to her. But so there's a couple different ways to think about it. The first thing I always say is, just like with anyone else, don't go into their house and break their windows. Like, don't go into a space where you aren't necessarily welcome, but you decide to insert yourself there and then insert your will over anything in the space. That is a categorically human thing to do. And especially in the past, when the vibration of the planet was a lot lower, that is a lot of times the ways that humans approach anything magical, anything different, especially fairies. Which is why I think part of it is that fairies get such a bad name, because they got tired of human bullshit after a while, which, like, I don't blame them. Mm-hmm. So that's always like my first thing to say. The second space is just like with anything else. And this includes your guides. This includes even like everything, I think, except for your higher self, because your higher self is just you. Never invite anything into your personal energetic space. Like, period. Your personal energetic space is your energetic space. Your guides can see you, they can interact with you, they can send you stuff, but they're not entering into your field of energy. And if they're not entering into your field of energy, like that is your safe boundary that allows you to still hold boundaries. And that also allows them to still hold boundaries. And that especially goes with things like fairies and other different, cross realm sort of beings, is they get to have those boundaries and you get to have those boundaries. So it kind of is mutual. And again, I know there's a lot of folklore stuff around this too. This is, again, just in my experience, with what I've channeled from them. They're very particular. There are many, many, many different types. The same way there are many species in our worlds, there's many species in their world, and they're all considered fairies because we lump them all into the same bucket. They essentially just come from the fae or fairy realm from my experience. And yeah, so when it comes to them, just like with any other beings that are not your guides, you want to approach them not knowing anything about them. You want to approach them coming and getting to know them, etc. And if you have a fairy as a guide, which sometimes people do, then you can be a little bit more casual because you already know them, they know you, they have an agreement here, they're here to help you, that kind of thing. But if you want to work with fairies, or if you feel like stuff in your house is going missing, or you feel like they keep poking you, or maybe they different things that come up that tend to be typically fairy stuff, that is always my first recommendation, is make sure you go in with owning your own energy, understanding they have theirs, and never go in to their windows, or to their house, and smash their windows, just like you would want them to do to yours.
Okay, so because I've had this question before and I didn't fully know how to answer it. Some people have issues with fairies, whether it's taking stuff or, well, it sounds like it's primarily taking stuff. So if you're absolutely sure that you're just not placing stuff in a different place and just losing track of it or that sort of thing, what would you suggest? Especially if you're not super spiritually sensitive, what would you suggest?
So this is what my husband does, because we have a variety of fairy-like creatures around us in our house, and they really love to play games with him. And so this is what he does, and this is what I highly recommend. He will say, like, out loud, "This was a really fun game. I've enjoyed playing. I will play with you again later, but I really need blank thing back right now." So it honors the fact that he played, honors that. Now, that's not always 100% they're going to give it back always, because there might be something else going on. You never know. But it's worked for him, I would say, 89% of the time. And in that space, I recommend doing that. The other great thing that I always say, if you really feel like you are having issues or you're really being contacted by them, setting out a small bowl or a small tray with shiny things that they are allowed to take if they would like to take something. It's kind of like giving them an option of being like, this is for you. Here's some small rocks. Here's some, like, a shiny old ring I don't know that I'm offering to you, whatever it is. I have a box for my fairy friends is filled with stuff that they decided they wanted, which they are more than welcome to take away from said box. But that's another way of doing it too, is being like, oh, you can have this instead.
Thank you. This is actually very validating, because for the times, I mean, it's not like all the time, but every so often I'll have a consult with somebody and they'll be like, hey, they'll be like, I didn't believe in this until it started to happen. I leave out jewelry and I go back to it and it's gone. And I'll do a kind of energetic reading on either them or their space. And when I found the Fae, I've always just been like, okay, especially if they don't really want to talk. So for the times that has happened, I ask my higher self, I ask my folks, I'm like, oh, okay, advice. And one of the main things that I've been saying, especially if stuff keeps disappearing, is I actually gave this advice to somebody about a week ago. And it was, all right, costume jewelry. Do you have costume jewelry you wouldn't mind parting with? Or can you buy like really shiny, just like flashy jewelry that would be far more interesting than the basic earrings or rings that you enjoy? So from what I'm hearing, I was right.
No, that works great. It really, really does. Also, I don't know if anyone can understand me, but go to Rebekah's live if you want it less glitchy. Go to her page. You'll see it better than on mine. For some reason, it's really glitchy on mine. Probably Eclipse stuff. I don't know.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's a
I know.
but
Yeah, you and I can hear each other fine, but if for some reason people keep commenting, and I want to make sure that they hear the answers, so I'm like, go over there.
Yeah.
Go to Rebekah's side, because that seems to be working better. But no, you're totally right. That works great. It also gives you kind of it makes them feel special too, because you're intentionally wanting to dedicate something for them, and that tends to pull them in more to what you're asking. Also, creating spaces outside where they're comfortable too can be really helpful, whether that is making a little fairy garden, whether that is wind chimes that you have some crystals around, anything like that can also be really comfortable, and saying like, hey, you're welcome to have some of this space too. Like, you hang out in this space, that's great. You can have this whole zone.
Mm-hmm. It's something I always refer to as spiritual compromise. And this is something I typically talk to people about when it comes to ghosts. I'll give an example. Somebody had a ghost of a guy who just happened to wind up in their basement, long story. And at first they were afraid because he kept materializing when they were all downstairs. And I talked to him about it and found out he just really liked watching movies with the family, and he missed his own family. And we talked about it. I was just like, hey, yeah, like it broke my heart, because I also talked to him. I was like, have you found your family? Like, do you need help with that? Are you sure you want to be here? Like that kind of thing. And he was just like, it's a lot to think about, but I just like to watch movies and I don't want to scare them. And so I talked to the person, the client, and I said, hey, now that you understand who he is, and I talked about, what he showed me and that sort of thing. And I said, is it okay if there's a compromise of when you're all down as a family, if he stands in that corner and watches movies? Now that you understand he means you no harm. He was so sorry about it. He was like, I didn't mean to scare the little ones. I didn't even know that they could see me. I got really excited about the movie and they saw me. And I was like, so that was
My
a compromise.
heart. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I had a really validating and interesting ghost experience recently that I figured you would appreciate if I shared. Basically, this old house that I've gone into a couple times, and the first time I went into that old house, I was like, there's a ghost downstairs, and it's like a Victorian house. It's really, really old. And I was like, there's a ghost downstairs. She wears all black. She walks around, and she's very judgmental on everyone and everything that walks into the house. Not malicious, just like, she's judging you as a person when you walk in. And if you're not a good person, you're probably not going to sleep very well. Like, if you were to stay the night in the house, right? Like, it's like, she's very much that energy. And then a couple floors up, there's another one, which is less of a like corporeal form and more of like an imprint of like an energetic memory, right? Where you can kind of see them as a ghost, but they more just kind of walk up and back somewhere, and that's just what they do.
Yeah.
So I've been in this house, like I said, a bunch of times, and then taking a tour of this house, whatever. And then the guy who owns the house, most recently when I went in again, he was giving another tour, and he brought us to this one room, and he was like, yeah, this is the room of this very prolific suffragette woman who used to own this house. And there was a portrait of her on the wall, and I was like, that's her. Like, that's the lady downstairs. She ended up being called crazy, even though she fought for rights to vote. It was this whole crazy thing. She was absolutely awesome. But upon doing further research, one of the reasons she was called crazy, which of course she wasn't crazy, she was just a woman in the 50s who refused to get married and lived on her own. So nuts. But she would wear all black, especially all black dresses, and walk around town cleaning up garbage. And everyone called her crazy for that. But that's exactly how I saw her. And it was so cool to finally be like, I see you. I know why you're still in this house. And like have that validating story, because before she didn't want to talk at all. And it was like, once I knew her story, then she was willing to like dump everything out. And sometimes that's totally how it works with the goat. Like the same way with your man who just wants to watch the movies, which is the sweetest thing ever.
Yeah.
That's totally how it works with us sometimes. It's like, until you figure out all the pieces of the puzzle, they're like not into talking to you. But then once you find the puzzle, then they're like, oh, let me tell you everything about everything.
I think, there's a very human side of that. It's the concept of being seen. I think that's it. And it's another thing too on as far as psychic abilities go, there's so much to seeing someone. And this is, you don't have to be psychic or whatever you want to call it to be seen and see. There's just so much
Yeah.
to it. And that's, yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, these are wonderful stories. I'm like, yes, they're out there, you know?
Hmm. Well, the funniest thing about this is just like a side note. Someone went into the house that she was in, and she's obviously a divine feminine force. Like, she ran for office before women were allowed to vote, which is like, talk about badass, like amazing. But a man, went into the house and was trying to like cleanse her from the space, and she totally pushed back and was basically like, "F you know," like I'm not going anywhere, and you can't just banish me from my house. And so then he had a really rough time of it. And then the next day he went in and was like, hey, like I'm healing my divine masculine, you're healing your divine feminine, like we can get along. And then she was totally nice to him. And it's just like so human. And we forget that because it feels spiritual to us, but to them, it's just them continuing to have an earth experience, which we're all having in such a big way.
Yeah. It's, I always explain to people, I'm like, look, we're here to learn a lesson. And if we don't manage to learn
Mm-hmm.
a significant part of that lesson while we're still in this, we will learn it
Mm-hmm.
in spirit somehow. So, one, that's why I advocate for therapy. I'm like, let's learn as much as we can right now. Because it's harder to find a therapist
Yeah.
when you're in spirit. Or maybe it's not anymore. I actually know some spirits who, like especially around battlefields and stuff, when they can visit, they actively work with spirits to listen to them, and it's been this kind of beautiful thing. Yes, um, but
People are cool.
yeah. Goodness, my mind's going like to so many places right now of like wholesomeness and like I'll tell you this on
Oh.
live with Hannah this past week. We joked about it, but I'm so serious. You have all these paranormal investigators that go into like asylums and hospitals and they, overturn dust and all this stuff. I was like, I would like to go to these places and bring cookies and juice and put them all out in a circle and just be like, hello, everyone. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted to bring everybody cookies and hang out because I bet you the energy is kind of weird with a lot of people most of the time. So I just wanted to share some good energy with everybody. And if anybody wants to talk, I'll be here.
That's such a good idea. I love that.
I feel like that's the paranormal investigation show that we need. None of us knew we needed it, but I feel like we all need it. We just need to sit down every time the show comes on. You pull out some cookies and juice yourself, and you're just like, let's heal. Like let's learn some things and heal.
One of my guides just said it's the Great British Baking Show of paranormal investigation. And I love that. Oh,
Is there like a knockout round though? Can they explain that, please?
right? They were just like, the energy of like the Great British Bake
Yeah.
Off, right? Like, it's just like, oh, it's a lovely competition and we're all going to hang out together. And it's just everyone's super nice. As opposed to like in American reality TV, it's like, and then they almost slice their finger. And you're like, oh no, like it's totally different.
Yeah.
And so that's what my guides just referred to this idea as. It's the Great British Bake Off of paranormal investigation of just here, have some cookies and we're going to talk.
Nice.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Something I wanted to get back to because
Oh,
I know we could go on that. Something
right.
I talk to folks about is energetic signatures of beings because, especially for folks who are just waking up to being aware that they already had abilities and they're acknowledging their abilities, I should say. I use energetic
Mm-hmm.
signatures as a way to be like, hey, so if you're looking for this person, you might feel this. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes for folks, it's kind of like where like the clairsentience kind of meets the clairemotive. I find that most people have the ability to pick up on emotion very easily and understand if something's in the room, whether that's from a clairsentient level or a claircognizant level. So going
Mm-hmm.
back to the Fae real quick, because I have a lot of questions on here about people being like, I think it's Fae, what if it's Fae, that kind of thing. So if you were to explain the energetic signature, what you would feel if you couldn't see the Fae, the fairies, how would you
Mm-hmm.
describe that?
So it's a beautiful question and I love it. Unfortunately, there's not one clear answer because there's just as many species of them as there are on our planet.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is there's a crisper edge to it than a lot of the other beings. A lot of the other beings are more go with the flow and willowy, and the Fae generally are very clear about themselves. They know what they are, they know what they want, they have a very strong culture kind of element.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of black and white kind of energy, despite the amount of trickstery stuff that they can have, because
Mm-hmm.
they do have that quite a bit in there as well. It is still very black and white of like their way, or just it's so hard to describe. There's so many different types, but playful in a sharp way. Sharp, playful.
Okay.
That's a hard way to describe it, but it feels it always feels like light to me in a different way. Like sometimes it's like multicolored light, sometimes it's like bright white light, but that is always like their energy is it's like a light source
Mm-hmm.
always because they have a lot more of it. It feels magical, it feels whimsical. They tend to have almost this is the way like their emotions tend to jump pretty quickly. So from like happiness to like frustration to like curiosity, like it kind of jumps around. So if it feels like something is very spry, very springy, very like jumpy, bouncy kind of energy back and forth, it's probably a fae being of some capacity. But again, there's so many species of them, so they're all different, and I hate generalizing it because that's what we like to do as humans. We like to put things in buckets, and it's just they don't go in buckets.
I would say from my experience reading them as guides, and for anybody who's just joining, we have gone over if you have a guide who is a fairy, and this will be on my
Mm-hmm.
YouTube later. But I'll just give specific examples according to what some of them have said. One showed me it was like
Mm-hmm.
grabbing glitter, and they went, and you see all the falling down. They were
Mm-hmm.
like, "That's what I feel like. I feel
Yeah,
like." One was feathers, and it was like
sure.
specific to like a hummingbird. So like they move so quickly, and they're just kind of everywhere, but they can also stay put. Um,
Yeah.
the other one was
They
both.
are one of the blurriest, most static energies
Mm-hmm.
that come in like corporeal beings, is it is very blurry and very kind of staticky
Yeah,
in general.
yeah. So yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah.
the best thing I've got. I will say I've done some astral projection to not quite into the fairy realm because again, I don't feel like that's my space in this current corporeal form to go into that realm, but into spaces where they are comfortable chatting with me.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are fully incarnated and fully in their own bodies and less like an energy that's in our world and more like they're in their world, they feel very honestly, I think the way that Tolkien channeled in the elves and the hobbits is all just fairy energy generally. That's like I always revert it back to fiction because most fiction that's very high vibration is channeled in, which you know and which we've talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that that is the best way that I can describe when they are actualized and like in their power and in their space. All of the different variations of beings that kind of are in like that middle earth zone is the best way I can describe the way that their energy feels.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Um, great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will also say, like, if you read a book, a fiction book, and it has fairies in it, and you're like, oh my gosh, the way that this being is described in this book feels very much like this being that I'm working with, just it's safer to assume fairy than to assume not fairy
Mm-hmm.
and go with that.
Okay. Yeah. Especially on the to hold respect for a being that is different, especially when coming to that. Sometimes it's when you don't always
Mm-hmm.
have the answers that it requires slow and caution and respect, and that's entirely okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
I
yeah.
will say too, with my like fairy box that I keep all of the stuff in for them,
Mhm.
if anything gets set on top of that box, I told them that they could let me know. What they do to let me know is they give me like a piercing headache on this side of my head. And I'm like, oh, something's on the box. And I have to go take it off the box,
Mhm.
which is very their energy, right? Like, oh, we'll let you know. Like, you'll know. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Like, and that's how
Mhm.
they communicate. And it's important to note that once
Mhm.
again, they will communicate differently from how other beings will communicate, from how other
Yeah.
guides will communicate. It's just a matter of
Mhm.
learning that and kind of testing it over time, whether you mean to or not. That kind of thing.
Yeah. And as always, and I always say this every time I'm talking about beings outside of yourself, practice your spiritual hygiene. Shield, ground, clear, period. Before and after you try to talk to them, it's important to hold that space for yourself.
For sure. For sure. So we talked about things that are traditionally seen as more pleasant looking, even if that's not how all of them look. I want to get into some things that perhaps look less pleasant on a general note.
Yeah.
Um, so, one thing I'll talk about is out here, the guardians of burial grounds out here. There are. P.S. If anybody hears the awesome jazz that's happening in like the apartment next door, that is the music happening right now. So there's that. Um, so, anywho, um, there are two burial spaces in particular that I think of where the guardians look kind of similar, and I'll be real, they look creepy. And the thing is, I've actually asked other people who are sensitive to describe to me what they're seeing as well. So what I'm about to describe to you is something that I've also checked with other people, and it's also not the case with every burial ground. Can't stress that enough. Burial ground guardians will look different. So I'm only going to give you an example of two close by burial grounds that happen to have similar guardians. So the first burial ground is an unmarked burial ground under a parking lot. Yeah, everyone knows about it. It's a place called Gallows Hill.
That's not good.
Mm, uh, that particular guardian stands at one non-human creature. Stands, I'd say, between like 8 and 9 feet. I typically don't go right up on it. I usually stay on the other side of the street. Can be out anytime. I've seen him out during the daytime more than in the evening time. And very long limbs. In fact, it's like the arms go all the way down to the ground and kind of like stumps over like this. Um, for that one, I haven't typically seen a mouth, though there are kinds of like slots for eyes. It's a very dark kind of creature. The interesting thing is, too, especially during the daytime, when the sun is shining, it's not that the sun can't shine through it, but there's some kind of, when I've seen it during the daytime, it's like the sun catches on it. And it's one of those things you'd have to be looking for in order to really see it. So I feel like people would drive by all the time and not see it. Um, but that being in particular, once again, because looks can be deceiving, I've never been threatened by it. I've been threatened by some of the guys out there. There are a lot of men who also may have been taken to the gallows for crimes that they did not commit, because that was during the early 1800s, and crime records are, well, we're working on them. Um, that's a
Mhm.
particular place where more violent things will happen to people. I've often told people who, if they're carrying child, if they're having health concerns, do not go on that property. You have no business being there. Like, I saw a guy literally get scratched, like blood came, like he was just standing there, and then all of a sudden, and I was like, okay, we're leaving.
Mhm.
I've seen people get tripped. I've seen people, if they're wearing jewelry like this, it be tugged. Um, Not good stuff out there. Here's the thing, though. I bring it
Mhm.
back to the Guardian. The Guardian. I've never felt threatened by that thing. Looks scary, very large, but
No.
otherwise is doing its job, which is looking over that particular burial ground, even though it's under a parking lot.
So horrible. Horrible. Yeah. Honestly, that doesn't sound like a terrifying being to me either, even the way you describe it. I've seen beings that look very similar, and I've never felt threatened by them either. They tend to be very earth rooted,
Mhm.
which makes them very not interested in attacking or being negative or anything like that. They tend to be very grounded and just like, this is me,
Mhm.
forest stuff. That being said, very on occasion have come across some terrifying beings out in the forest. For sure. Forest spirits are not something to mess with.
Mhm.
Period. That is their space. You are a guest, and if they tell you to leave, leave. Just like if they came into your house and you told them to leave, they should leave. I will say too that as you grow and expand in your psychic abilities, you get so much more confident in these spaces because you understand what's going on, you understand your safety and all of those things. You'd be like, awesome, I will leave. Like, I will get away from this. This doesn't feel good. And that is the goal too. There's nothing out there that is entirely good or entirely bad, but like there's some definitely very negative energies that exist, and it is important to have that safety and protection of yourself. The more confident you get in your abilities, the easier that is, just generally. But things that look really scary tend to be the things that scare me far less than others
Mhm.
because they tend to just be, they may be fairy creatures or come from different dimensions. This also goes for demons, or what people classically think of as demons, which is a whole other bucket of worms I won't fully get into. But they tend to look really scary. To them, they don't, though.
Mhm.
To them, this is like they're not trying to scare you. They're just existing in the form that is theirs. And they're just there. And it's a totally different energy between something that's actively trying to cause harm and something that just looks scary.
Something else to consider is just because you see it, and when I say you, I mean general, obviously you know this, but just because you see it doesn't mean that it's after you. Just because you're affected by it doesn't mean it's trying to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
Some things just
Mm-hmm.
are affecting. It's kind of like if you know somebody who gets really angry and then suddenly the whole room is filled with like this kind of anger. Well, they have the ability of shooting their emotion out like that. It may not be because they're trying to make the whole room angry, but they just have that ability. Some other beings have that
Mm-hmm.
ability. And what we need to do, and you've mentioned this before, is I always ask, is this thing after me? And if the answer is no, I'll be like, okay, well, I'm being affected by it. Oh, I should probably let that go and just shield.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
100%.
yeah. Uh,
It's kind of the same concept where people, if you're like working on like communication with someone and you're like, the story I'm telling myself is this, it's kind of the same concept spiritually, generally, is if like you actually check yourself and you're like, wait a second, is this coming after me, or is this just something that's like negative around me and I don't want it near me? And that changes the dynamic completely. And if you just, it's something negative around you, you don't want it near you, then just pop up a shield or say, hey, this is not the space you're allowed to exist in. If it's in your space, right, your home or whatever it is, and then you can and move on from there. But for the most part, it's always assess the story you're telling yourself first and whether or not that's a valid or accurate story based on the actual energy that you're perceiving.
something I had to tell somebody recently, due to something in their um, vicinity, was just because you can see it or perceive it doesn't mean you have to save it either. I think some
Mm-hmm.
people get into this mindset of, I have this gift, and that means I must save everything. It's like, one, I'm always of there's a parable in the Bible, and I'm not like a crazy Bible person, but like, and I, P.S., anybody who, that's a to be crazy about the Bible, not a, thing. I want to be clear about that because I hold no judgment. But there's a parable in the Bible that talks about um, how do you expect to remove the speck in your neighbor's eye if you have a plank in your own eye? And I think about that so often
Mm-hmm.
on like things that,
Fair.
yeah. And sometimes not everything's looking to be saved. That's another thing too.
Yeah, I say this is something I stand by. Everything has its own sovereignty, and you don't get to decide what's best for something else the same way you don't get to decide what's best for another person. Um, it's the same thing with spiritual stuff. And the go-to philosophy in a lot of modern new age kind of teachings is like create your temple and like banish anything that doesn't belong there and send them to the light. That's where they need to go anyway,
Mm-hmm.
which can entirely works to negate some other being's free will and their own sovereignty, which doesn't work. Like, genuinely, it just doesn't work. They have their own stuff going on. You can't forcibly save a person. You're not going to forcibly save a being. Even if you do know what's best for them, they got to want it too. Like, you wouldn't want someone to come into your space and be like, you need to go on this diet. Like, that's not how life works. You can't do that to them. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
yes, I fully agree. And that is a huge trap with spirituality is people realize the power that they have, and then they think they have to use that power to help other people either realize it or help other beings cross over those things. That's not, everyone has these abilities in some capacity, and it's no one person's job to decide how those are used on other people.
Exactly.
Really quick, I had a couple other people. I know it's freezing. Check Rebekah's live. It's better. I had a whole bunch of people just to go join and comment that. I know it's freezing on my end. Go to Rebekah's live.
Oh, goodness. And for anybody who's just joining, or if you happen to see that kind of lag or anything like that, this will be on my YouTube as soon as it gets processed and that sort of thing. And when I've posted the YouTubes in the past, it comes through as clearly as I'm seeing them right now. Yes. Thank you again for bringing up the whole, to have abilities doesn't equal quit your day job and work for the FBI and solve murders. And can I say that? That whole thing. Some people get the idea of like, you have to make it a full-time life choice. No, it's, you have abilities for you, whatever that means. If that means you apply it to your job working a 9 to 5 and have intuitive pings on when you need to check certain emails, great. That's exactly what it's for. Whatever that means.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes if I'm like not tuning in that day or I'm not like doing readings, like most I'll use my abilities is if my guides need to get my attention about something. And sometimes it's as simple as like, you need to buy a hairbrush. And of course, then I'll be like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And then if I don't buy the hairbrush, my hairbrush will break, right? Like, I'm like, oh, okay, of course. Or, regardless, it'll break. I'll be like, I either got it or didn't. But like, that is enough too. And it also can just be a personal practice thing as well for you alone, which is super valuable in and of itself.
Absolutely. And the point is that it resonates with you. Whatever you do, be sure that it resonates with you. That's what's important. That's the lesson. That's the purpose.
Right.
I got a few questions a little while back asking about dragons. I wanted to share a story with you first. So, goodness, where to start with this? So, I won't say his name. I will say to all people following me, no, it is not Jimothy or Rupert. That's what I will, and it's also not Alexander. So I lay that out first. This ghost friend of mine, who also works with a person in the corporeal to keep in the present tense and that kind of thing, found a dragon. The thing is, though, I feel like it's going to be a bit different from how you work with your dragon, because this dragon, it was kind of concluded that it had started off as a thought form spirit of a child. And I've seen this before when I've done some readings for people. It's like when they're very young and they need a friend or someone to protect them, and they don't feel strong enough on themselves. It's almost like they create this energy in order to work for them. And my phone's dying, but it's back. I've seen, one time I did a reading for somebody and one of their guides looked like a plush dog. And it was like the funniest thing, because I was like, okay, this is what I'm describing and I'm seeing stitching. And they were like, that was a dog that I had. And they mentioned, they were like, one day it disappeared. And I was like, well, it's in spirit with you. I've not seen this before, but here we are. It was that kind of, once again, kids are major powerful, so able to put that kind of energy into it. That all being said, there's some kids somewhere in the world who I'm pretty sure is grown up or well into teen years, they created this energy of a dragon. And we've found out it is a Welsh dragon, which, once again, I'm not talking about Rupert. It just so happens it's a Welsh dragon. I have not seen the dragon myself. I've also not gone looking for it. But this ghost found the dragon, and now they are friends.
I love that.
So they hang out and stuff.
That's awesome.
But it's a fascinating thing, and I'd love to hear your take on that, because the first time I heard it, I was like, I'm not discounting it just because I may not understand all of it. However, that's fascinating. But so there's beings that I believe that we can create and give sentience to. It's kind of, once again, that thought form spirit kind of thing. Not all of them have to be bad or good. Sometimes they are dragons, apparently. Some child somewhere is very powerful. But that's the dragon I know. What's the dragon you know?
I love that. Okay, so the dragon I know, actually, this is a very interesting story. So there is things called like basically energy attachments. So like usually people associate that with negative entities, which is not always the case. They don't have to be negative just to be an energy attachment. Sometimes energy is just attached to you because you're an energy source. And they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to sit with you, right? So I always check myself for energy attachments fairly regularly because, you know, I have big energy just in general. And so going through the world, it's important. So one day I felt this thing like smack into my back, like hard. And I was like driving. And I like even like, whoa, what is going on? And this is when my dragon was little. He's not little anymore. He's now very big, but he was really little at the time. And he smacked into my back and he like became an energy attachment instantaneously. And if my initial thing is like, no, you can't do that. But I go to pull it off. And he's like, thank God I finally found you. I've been looking for you everywhere. I've been basically kind of lost, but I was supposed to be your guide. And then I totally like took it like way too literally and tried to join you, but I don't have a body here. So it was like a whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did a bunch of muscle testing on it. I talked to my other guides about it. And they're like, no, this is actually like, this is part of your guys' journey. This was your plan. This is what we were supposed to do. And so he popped up and I like removed him from my energy space so he can be his own being. But now he's a guide. And so he's grown into his like full form, which is now much, 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 much larger than the little guy who sat on my back. But he didn't have his own energy here to like navigate things. So he was just kind of very small energy until we kind of connected, and then he felt rooted again and grounded and all these different things. So yeah, that's the energy of him, and he's around all the time, which I really appreciate. Yeah, dragons are really fun energy in general, and I love that one that was created gets to be friends with a ghost. Makes perfect sense to me. Everything is chaotic neutral, and that feels perfectly aligned with chaotic neutral. Also, again, guys, I know it's lagging. I'm sorry it's lagging. There's nothing we can do about it tech-wise. Go check out Rebekah's live, or she'll post this on YouTube later if you want to watch it.
I'm going to tell you a story about somebody's guide that I've met recently. And they had what was super cool. It was also really affirming for me, was every year they get a reading by somebody different. So super cool to work with somebody who had a number of readings from many different people. And I didn't know that beforehand. So it was cool to like, your phone's having time.
It just decided to go off out of nowhere, and like now I'm stuck. So here we are. It's fine. We're good. I got it.
So I went into the reading, of course, blindly, and it was a cool thing for me to also like get that confirmation. I had the same number, and of course they understood as well. Oh, there she goes. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. Your screen went fuzzy. And to that question, yes, everyone does have guides. Oh dear. Well, we'll see. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't see or hear you. So if you can hear me, perhaps leave and come back. That might be good. Okay, here's a question. Do I think guides choose who they guide or are assigned? I believe it is a... Oh, okay, she left. So I believe that it is a compromise that's made. It's how you, as well as the guide, I believe, can learn throughout life, by watching you or that sort of thing. So, or working with you, I should say. Yeah. So, let's see. A guide is those within your surrounding who mean to work with you and work for your greater learning. Those in spirit. Some may be past relatives, some may be ancestors, some may be soul connections. It depends on who you're working with and how aware they are. There you are.
Hey, I'm back, but I do think that I should probably cut it kind of shorter because my phone is having issues.
Happy universe time that we are in, right?
It's eclipse season. It just is what it is.
Well, how about I'll
I don't know.
this story and we can call it a night. How about that?
Okay.
Okay. So
Sounds great to me. Here we go.
this person's guides, it's also interesting to guides will sometimes want to talk to some people more than others. There's a very personal choice with all of that, especially when using somebody to channel. They have opinions. They don't have to roll in and say, oh, I'm going to tell you everything just because you can talk to me. That's not how that works. Just throwing that one out there.
Nope. No, it does not.
But I said, because the person, they were like, oh, this was something that they actually told me. They're like, oh, is the dragon still around? And I was like, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to keep doing the reading and see. Everybody else, they didn't tell me anything about, but they were excited to see if the dragon was still around. So I was like, oh, okay, I have not read a dragon, but we'll see. What I use for some spirit guide readings is I will look away and I'll pull pieces according to the question that I'm asking. It's kind of like some people work with cards. I work with my rock collection and my water collection. That's what I do. It makes sense to me. But as soon as I picked this thing up, I was like, this is the dragon. And then I put it away and then I removed the thought again. And then when I picked it up again, I asked, I was like, is this the dragon? And I heard a giggle, like in that space of channeling. I heard a kind of, and I was like, you're not a dragon. And I kid you not, it is a kid. And they like unzip this kind of onesie and they kind of look out and they're like, you caught me. And I said, yeah, what? And like, maybe 7-year-old or 8-year-old kid, and he was like, I fooled the last two. They didn't think, like literally, he's just like, I fooled the last two. I can't believe I didn't fool you. And I was like, I just asked if you were or not. Did they not ask? And he was like, well, I fooled them. And I was like, you can still be a dragon.
You're like, I'm not saying yippee one, but okay.
Yeah. The thing is though, it was like the same idea of he had created this energy of a dragon. And it was fascinating. I've never had that happen before. But the thing was, I was talking to the person and it was so funny how they like did the hood and kind of pulled it back like a onesie. And I was explaining this and the person started to laugh and they were like, well, Peter Pan was my favorite movie growing up. And in Peter Pan, all the lost boys have those little onesies. This little boy had been with her. Yeah, like he had been with her for so long, knew that she loved dragons, and so he was like, "Oh, I know how to be super cool. I'll be a dragon." And so he just took on that persona, and he's been fooling people for I don't even know how many years.
That's so cute, though. He cares. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
Good job.
I don't know how I caught that. I don't know how I caught it either. I was just like, these are also, how I know I'm channeling, because I'm just like, I consider myself a creative person. But when stuff like this happens, I'm like, okay, there's a line.
That's
I can't come up with
mhm. Right? Well, it's also so funny. Krista and I were just talking about this week, where sometimes you'll get an image and they'll be like, "Oh, it's an apple," and you're like, "Okay," and you like tell the person like, "I see an apple," and they're like, "That doesn't matter to me," and you're like, "I know, but your guide just keeps showing me an apple over and the apple's getting bigger." Okay, I don't know. And then after a minute, you're like, "It's New York. They're talking about the Big Apple. They just made an apple big, and now it's New York." But like, it's just so many different ways of connecting things, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, it's X, Y, and Z thing, and now that totally makes sense. I'm moving there next month or whatever." And you're like, "Well, they couldn't just say New York. They had to show me a big apple." Like it's it's just that level of thing though. Like it's so nuanced and interesting when it comes to that space.
mm-hmm. I've had a lot of, I won't say a lot, but I'll say a fair amount of spirit guides. They will start telling the story. And I know when I start to see the story, I'm like, okay, this happened when they were the last time in their corporeal form. But it has something to do with something. And I'm like, okay, so hang tight on the story. We're going to have this story together. And I go into it and I explain what's happening. Da, 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 da. And then at the end of the story, I have to be like, okay, that was the metaphor. And it has something to do with this. And then I'll bring up like the points, like sometimes it'll be finances or it'll be like managing time or something like that. And so I bring that together and then I'm like, so your life right now? And so, that's when after I channel, I look back at the screen and I'm like, huh? And they're like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
It is cool.
So interesting.
What we do is cool.
It is,
I like
right?
that.
Uh-huh. Definitely had the same experience multiple times where I'm like, this is what they're talking about, and I'm sure I'll understand at the end, but I don't understand it now. We go through it, and then it comes back, and I'm like, now I get it. All right, we just had to go on an adventure first. That's great.
Yes, for anyone who thinks that this is beer, this is kombucha. Just because somebody was like, "You're drinking beer," and I'm like, "I'm drinking mooch."
Oh, that's awesome.
Well,
well, yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna
just
start ending it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it is eclipse week, so if you are feeling extra energetically drained or really triggered, you might have really activated dreams too, because eclipses tend to be where the energy is getting moved for you and not you so much doing the moving. So just to highlight that, hang tough, everybody. Tech is starting to do some weird stuff, apparently. But this has been super fun. Thank you, Rebekah. I love getting to talk to you, and it always makes my day brighter.
Yay, same. I feel absolutely the same, and I'm gonna give a plug to you. So, Alchemist Inkwell comes out tomorrow. It's a podcast, and if you haven't been listening, all of you should catch up. It should make you feel a lot better about your life. It certainly has made me feel a lot better about my life.
I'm so glad. Someone just asked, what do I think about astrology? I love it. My business partner is like a world-renowned astrological mage and a badass human. And so I love astrology. I don't know a ton about it because I have this amazing person in my life who does know a ton about it. So I kind of defer to her because I'm the energy side. But that's all we do, an astrological update every time we do a podcast, which is awesome.
Yes.
But yeah, and I'm also going to plug for Rebekah. Please go check out all of her stuff. Any of my followers who are on here, like, she's incredible. Her ghost friends are fantastic. She's also a very talented actress, so her reenactments are the best. And she does all sorts of readings and programs too. So check out her stuff. And she's writing a book, so get ready for that too.
Yes. And likewise, you also do lots of readings and all sorts of things. Yay! Everybody, links are in bios. Thank you so much for watching. And we're all going to get